They told you to fake it till you make it. But what if that very mindset is the silent thief of your dreams? Neville Goddard exposed the paradox most people miss. Every time you fake, you declare to your subconscious, "I don't have it yet." And the more you declare lack, the more lack you live. Have you ever wondered why fake it till you make it feels so exhausting, and why deep down it never really works? People put on the smile, force the confidence, act as if they're successful, yet inside, nothing changes. That's because pretending and conscious creation are not the same thing. Neville Goddard revealed a shocking truth. Living in the end is not about performance, it's about identity. What if the very effort to fake it is the reason you're stuck? Imagine the freedom of no longer forcing, no longer proving, no longer waiting for the world to validate you. Instead of pretending, you step into the wish fulfilled, calm, natural, inevitable. This isn't philosophy. It's the law of assumption in action. And once you see it, you'll never approach manifestation the same way again. The truth? Living in the end is not pretending. It's embodying. It's not acting. It's assuming. And once you discover this shift, you'll understand why imagination creates reality, and why most people stay stuck chasing while a few finally rest in fulfillment. Most people here live in the end and instantly imagine they have to put on a mask, like an actor stepping on stage. They force smiles, dress in ways they can't afford, or repeat words they don't really feel. That's the trap of fake it till you make it. It looks convincing on the outside, but inside it's heavy. And heavy things don't float for long. Think about a child pretending to be a superhero. He puts on a cape, jumps on the couch, and yells, "I can fly," but deep down, he knows he can't. That's what happens when adults try to manifest money, love, or peace by pretending. They recite affirmations without conviction, almost like parrots. Neville Goddard would say, that's not conscious creation, that's self-deception. It's no wonder many people quit manifestation altogether. They confuse the law of assumption with role play, and when results don't show up, they assume it doesn't work. But the truth is, they weren't applying the principle. Pretending keeps the inner world shouting, "This is not real yet." And the outer world, it simply mirrors that doubt back. Someone once told me they used to drive around neighborhoods of rich houses to attract wealth. But instead of feeling abundant, they felt small, envious, almost like intruders. Do you see the problem? The act of pretending just magnified the gap. They were living in lack, not in the end. That's why Neville Goddard teachings insist, assume the wish fulfilled, not pretend it's true. When you fake, you're constantly checking, do I look convincing? Do others believe me? That very tension shows you don't believe yourself. It's like wearing clothes that don't fit. You can squeeze into them, but you can't relax. Manifestation truth doesn't ask you to force, it asks you to soften into being, and softness never comes from pretending. There's a big difference between imagining with power of assumption and playing dress-up. Pretending is like spraying perfume on dirty clothes. It masks for a moment, but it doesn't transform. Conscious creation, on the other hand, washes the fabric from the inside. That's the identity shift Neville spoke of. Not cosmetic change, but essence change. Maybe you've seen people post luxury cars on Instagram with captions like, "My life soon." They're hoping the universe buys their performance, but the subconscious isn't fooled by hashtags. It responds only to feeling, the secret Neville hammered over and over. If the inner feeling is lack, no outer theater can trick the law of assumption. The world is full of people hustling to look like they've made it. But inside, they're exhausted, anxious, waiting for applause to validate their act. That's the shadow of fake it till you make it. It may impress strangers, but it doesn't impress imagination. Imagination creates reality, not performance, not acting, not empty effort. Think of it this way. Pretending is like blowing up a balloon with holes. No matter how hard you try, the air leaks out. But living in the end is sealing those holes before you inflate. The energy holds, the form stays, and reality bends. Neville Goddard wasn't teaching a trick for social media. He was pointing to spiritual awakening. So the misunderstanding is clear. Living in the end has nothing to do with faking confidence or forcing appearances. It's not about deceiving yourself or others. It's about aligning your inner world with the truth you've already chosen. And once you see this, the next question naturally arises. What did Neville really mean when he said, live in the end? When Neville Goddard spoke about live in the end, he never meant pretending. He pointed to something far deeper. the deliberate choice to assume the wish fulfilled as if it were already part of your reality. It's the quiet acceptance that the future has already happened. You simply rest in it. No stage performance, no convincing, just certainty. Think of walking into your bedroom after a long day and lying down on your bed. You don't have to persuade yourself that you're resting. You simply feel it. That's what Neville meant by living in the end, a natural state of being that requires no applause. It's not role play. It's identity effortlessly acknowledged. The law of assumption isn't about psychological tricks. It's a spiritual law that responds to inner states, not outer theatrics. When someone assumes the wish fulfilled, the subconscious mind records that image as memory, not fantasy. It's the difference between daydreaming and recalling. One feels distant, the other feels inevitable. Neville repeated it again and again. Feeling is the secret. That feeling isn't a passing emotion. It's the certainty of already having. Living the end means sensing before seeing, resting before receiving, knowing before holding. The mind complicates, but the heart recognizes. It's profoundly simple yet transformative. Imagine a friend congratulating you casually. You don't need to visualize every detail of the success, just the naturalness of the moment. The handshake, the smile, the warmth of their words. Short, simple scenes like these are what Neville taught. Because they're not forced, they feel real, inevitable, done. Living in the end is shifting from the seeker to the one who has already found. It's no longer someday I'll be wealthy, but the quiet peace of abundance now. Not I'll meet love, but resting in the sweetness of already being loved. That subtle shift is manifestation truth. The subconscious accepts only what you are, not what you chase. It sounds paradoxical. You don't travel to the future, you bring the future into now. That is Neville Goddard's teaching. Assume the end and live from it as though it's the only reality. Not to prove anything, but because imagination creates reality. The inner world always precedes the outer. If you observe closely, people do this unconsciously all the time. The anxious person already lives in the end of failure and keeps experiencing it. The grateful person already lives in the end of victory and sees confirmations everywhere. Neville simply showed how to do it consciously. It's not invention, it's selection. To assume the wish fulfilled doesn't mean chasing evidence. It means inhabiting a state until it feels more real than what your eyes see. Once that happens, pretending has no place. Only trust remains. It's like living inside the final chapter of your story while the rest of the pages are still unfolding. And here lies the beauty. Living the end is not escaping reality, but stepping into your deepest truth. The end you assume is the essence of who you are, made visible. And this naturally opens the next question. How do we really tell the difference between pretending and embodying? Pretending is fragile. It's like wearing a costume that looks impressive from a distance but feels uncomfortable on the inside. You can smile, pose, or even act confident, but deep down there's a whisper that says, "This isn't me." Embodying, on the other hand, is quiet power. It's not about appearances, it's about identity. When you pretend, you're always aware you're acting. There's a subtle tension, a background effort to hold up the mask. It's similar to forcing a laugh. You may convince others for a moment, but you know it isn't genuine. Embodiment doesn't strain. It doesn't seek validation. It's simply who you are now, without effort. Think of it like learning a new language. In the beginning, you pretend to sound fluent. You memorize phrases, copy accents, and hope nobody notices the cracks. But the day you embody it, you don't think about grammar anymore. You just speak. That shift from "I'm faking it" to "this is me" is exactly what Neville Goddard pointed to. Pretending always emphasizes what's missing. If you fake wealth, your mind screams, "But I don't have it yet." If you fake confidence, your inner voice says, "I'm still insecure." Pretending keeps lack alive. Embodying, however, erases the distance. It's no longer something you're waiting for. It's the state you already inhabit. Imagine sitting in a chair. You don't need to remind yourself, "I'm sitting." You just are. That's embodiment. Natural, unquestioned, self-sustaining. Pretending, in contrast, is like perching on the edge of the seat, always adjusting, always making sure you look like you belong. And that constant effort gives away the truth. The law of assumption works only through embodiment. Pretending never touches the subconscious because the subconscious knows the difference. You can chant affirmations all day, but if they're coming from tension, they won't stick. When you embody, the feeling of already done seeps deep within, and the subconscious accepts it as reality. Many confuse pretending with positive thinking, but positive thinking is often surface level. It doesn't carry the weight of identity. Embodying isn't about forcing happy thoughts. It's about stepping into the end state and letting it feel normal. It's not fake it till you make it versus dwelling. It's embodying so fully that dwelling becomes unnecessary. Think of an actor who rehearses a role so deeply that he forgets he's acting. For the audience, it's believable, but for him, in that moment, it's real. That's the line between pretending and embodying. One is self-conscious, the other is self-forgetting. Neville called it living in the end, not pretending, but becoming. When you embody, you stop checking. You're not asking, is it working yet? Because you've already moved. Pretending constantly looks for proof, embodying rests. That rest is the sign that the identity shift has happened. The energy feels settled, inevitable, natural, and reality eventually has no choice but to catch up. So the difference is profound. Pretending is surface-level acting. Embodying is inner-world truth. One drains, the other restores. One resists, the other allows. And once you grasp this, the next realization comes naturally. Why does fake it actually create resistance while true embodiment flows with ease? Fake it till you make it sounds empowering at first, but beneath the surface it breeds tension. Why? Because every time you fake, you're subtly admitting, I don't have it yet. That inner contradiction creates friction. Instead of moving you closer, it keeps you locked in the loop of waiting. Neville Goddard teachings reveal, assumption frees, pretending binds. When you fake, you're constantly split between two selves, the one you are acting as and the one you secretly believe you still are. That tug of war is exhausting. It's like driving with one foot on the gas and the other on the brake. No wonder results feel slow or inconsistent. The subconscious never relaxes into the state. It resists. Resistance always comes from efforting. Pretending requires constant performance, and performance requires energy. But manifestation truth isn't about draining energy. It's about redirecting it. The law of assumption works like gravity. It doesn't need your struggle. It only needs your alignment. When you stop faking, resistance dissolves. Think about relationships. If someone is faking kindness, you can feel the inauthenticity immediately. Their smile doesn't match their eyes. Their words don't carry warmth. That mismatch creates tension in the room. The same thing happens within you when you fake abundance, love, or peace. The inner world senses the lie and resists it. Neville explained that conscious creation begins in stillness, not strain. Pretending feels heavy because it requires constant effort to maintain the act. True assumption feels light because it requires only being. You don't try to be yourself, you just are. And when you embody the wish fulfilled, it feels that effortless. Faking is like trying to force a seed to grow by tugging on its stem. The more you pull, the weaker it gets. Assumption, instead, is planting the seed and trusting the soil. You water, you wait, you rest. The growth is inevitable. That's the difference. Resistance versus trust, strain versus surrender. Another reason fake it creates resistance is that it trains you to watch the clock. You keep asking, when will it show up? Every glance at the clock reinforces the absence. But when you live in the end, time becomes irrelevant. You already feel it as done. That inner certainty removes the pressure, and with it, the resistance. Pretending also locks you into comparison. If you're faking wealth, you'll constantly measure yourself against those who really have it. That comparison highlights the gap, and the gap fuels more resistance. Embodiment, though, doesn't compare. It simply is. When you rest in identity shift, others become mirrors, not competitors. Resistance is simply the feedback of misalignment. It's your inner self saying, this doesn't match. That's why faking feels tight, anxious, unnatural. True assumption feels calm, grounded, inevitable. You can sense the difference in your body. One agitates, the other soothes. And that bodily knowing is often more honest than your thoughts. So the reason fake it creates resistance is simple. It amplifies lack. Pretending keeps your focus on what isn't real, while embodiment dissolves the question altogether. Neville Goddard's law of assumption is clear. When you assume the wish fulfilled, resistance fades, and life begins to mirror your inner ease. Which leads us naturally to the next question. Where does creation actually begin, inside or outside? Neville Goddard insisted over and over The outer world is nothing but a shadow of the inner. That's why trying to change the outside without shifting within always feels powerless. You can hustle, perform, or rearrange circumstances, but if the inner state remains the same, results repeat themselves. Inner cause, outer effect. That's the law. Think of someone trying to fix their reflection in a mirror. They adjust the glass, wipe it down, or even tilt it differently. But the reflection doesn't change until they change themselves. Outer acting without inner transformation is exactly that. Cleaning the mirror, instead of changing the face it reflects. This is why conscious creation begins in imagination. Neville taught that imagination creates reality, not the other way around. Outer action has meaning only when it flows from an inner identity shift. Otherwise it becomes empty effort, like rowing against the current. True power comes from alignment, not strain. Many people get caught in do more, try harder. They believe if they just act busy enough, results will follow. But action without inner assumption is scattered energy. The law of assumption doesn't respond to quantity of action, it responds to the quality of being. A single act from embodiment outweighs 1,000 acts from pretending. Take money as an example. A person can work 2 jobs, push themselves endlessly, and still feel broke inside. That inner I am broke continues to dominate no matter how much effort they put out. Another person embodying abundance may act with calm decisiveness, and opportunities seem to appear. Inner world first, outer world second. Neville used the phrase, assume the wish fulfilled, to highlight this truth. You don't perform the wish, you assume it. Then naturally your outer actions begin to align. They flow instead of force. That's the difference between inspired action and desperate action. One feels inevitable, the other feels exhausting. Imagine a tree. You don't see it straining to grow branches. It simply expands from within because the seed already contained the pattern. Outer growth is automatic once the inner is set. You don't need to force fruit to appear. It comes because the inner cause was planted. Manifestation works the same way. This doesn't mean you sit still and do nothing. Outer action is part of life, but Neville's teachings remind us that it's secondary, not primary. When the inner assumption is firm, action flows with ease. You make calls, send emails, or take steps, but they come from identity, not desperation. That difference changes everything. The danger of focusing only on outer acting is that it keeps you chasing results. You do more, check more, push more, and wonder why nothing shifts. But the law of assumption isn't mechanical, it's spiritual. It bends to being, not doing. Once being shifts, doing becomes effortless. That's the order Neville revealed. So the truth is simple. The outer world has no independent power. It's a reflection, a mirror, an echo. The cause is always inner. Once you live in the end, outer actions naturally follow as expressions, not performances. And that brings us straight into Neville's most repeated principle: feeling is the secret. Neville Goddard's most repeated phrase was simple but profound: feeling is the secret. He meant that no matter how vivid your imagination is, it's the feeling that gives it life. Without feeling, the scene remains a lifeless sketch. With feeling, it becomes a memory etched in the subconscious. Feeling seals the assumption into reality. Think of it like planting a seed. The seed is the image in imagination, but the soil is feeling. Without soil, the seed can't take root. You can imagine endlessly, but if you never feel the end, the subconscious doesn't accept it as real. Feeling is what convinces the inner world to say, this has happened. When you feel the wish fulfilled, you bypass logic. The mind may still argue, "Mom, but I don't see it yet." Yet the body relaxes into a knowing that doesn't need proof. That shift is powerful because the subconscious doesn't deal in logic. It responds only to sensation. Feeling is the language it understands. Neville often described it as the difference between watching a play and being in it. You can observe a scene, but unless you step into the role and feel it as yours, the subconscious won't register it. Feeling transforms imagination from fantasy into identity, and identity is what the outer world mirrors back. Consider love as an example. You can visualize being adored all day, but if you still feel lonely, the state doesn't stick. But when you close your eyes and actually feel cherished, like warmth wrapping around you, something shifts. That sensation writes a new script in the subconscious, and the world responds to that script. It's the same with money. Pretending to be wealthy may create tension, but feeling abundant dissolves the need to pretend. Even before the bank balance changes, You feel secure, free, relaxed. That calm confidence is the magnet. It's not performance, it's inner truth, and it carries far more power than any outer acting. This is why Neville Goddard teachings emphasize dwelling in feeling until it becomes natural. It's not about forcing excitement or hyping yourself up. Often the most powerful feelings are quiet. Peace, relief, satisfaction. They're not dramatic, but they are steady. And steady feelings impress the subconscious far more than forced emotion. Think about times you've worried. You didn't have to repeat affirmations of fear. The feeling itself was enough to shape events. Worry is proof of the law of assumption in reverse. If fear can manifest, so can faith. The mechanism is the same. Feeling makes it real. The only question is which feeling you choose to live in. So when Neville said feeling is the secret, he wasn't giving a nice slogan. He was handing you the key. The feeling of the wish fulfilled is the glue that bonds imagination to reality. Without it, nothing sticks. With it, nothing can stop it. That's why living the end is never about pretending. It's about feeling. And once you grasp that, the next step naturally unfolds. How do you practice this embodiment of feeling in a way that is simple, natural, and effective, without slipping into performance or strain? Neville Goddard always pointed to simplicity. You don't need complicated rituals or endless effort. The most powerful practice is done in stillness, when the mind is quiet and the body is at rest. He called this the state akin to sleep, when the conscious guard is lowered and imagination slips directly into the subconscious. That's where embodiment begins. The method is straightforward. Choose one short, simple scene that implies your wish is already fulfilled. Don't pick something elaborate. Keep it natural. For example, a friend saying congratulations, or you slipping into bed with the sweet relief of knowing it's done. The key is implication, not performance. The simpler, the better. Close your eyes, breathe, and imagine that scene as if it's happening right now. Don't watch it from a distance. Step into it. Feel the textures, the sounds, the warmth. Let it become as vivid as a memory. If you can recall yesterday's dinner, you can do this. It's the same faculty of imagination, redirected intentionally. As you dwell in the scene, shift from, "I hope this happens," to, "This already happened." That small turn changes everything. Hope keeps it far away. Memory makes it present. You rest in the end as though the wish is complete. That resting is the essence of living the end. Not pretending, but assuming. The goal is not excitement. Many think they must generate fireworks of emotion. But Neville stressed it's not about drama. It's about naturalness. Feel it until it seems ordinary, until it feels like home. When the scene stops feeling like fantasy and starts feeling familiar, you've impressed the subconscious. This quiet practice is like brushing your teeth. It's not glamorous, but it's essential. A few minutes in stillness each night before sleep can rewire identity more effectively than hours of anxious affirmations. Why? Because in rest, the subconscious is open, and what you feed it then becomes the blueprint for tomorrow. Imagine someone practicing this for love. Instead of repeating "I am loved" 1,000 times, they simply rest in the sensation of being embraced, of hearing "I love you." That one felt scene repeated gently is enough, because the subconscious doesn't need words, it needs feeling, and feeling is the secret. The same works for abundance. Picture the relief of paying a bill easily, or the smile of a friend saying, "You're doing so well." Don't overcomplicate it. A single image with deep feeling outweighs grand visualizations without heart. Quality beats quantity, and once the feeling settles, the outer world begins to align. Neville called this persistence in the assumption. Not forcing, but gently returning to the state until it feels stable. The practice is like tuning an instrument. At first it sounds off, but with repetition, the string holds. And once it's tuned, the music plays effortlessly. The inner world sets the tone for the outer. So the quiet embodiment practice is not about doing more, but about being still, imagining simply, and feeling deeply. That's the doorway to identity shift. And once you begin living in this way, how can you tell if you're truly embodying or just slipping back into subtle pretending? One of the clearest signs you've shifted from pretending to embodying is inner peace. You don't feel the constant need to prove, push, or check. Instead, there's a quiet confidence that settles in your chest. You walk through life lighter, not because the outer has changed yet, but because the inner already has. Another sign is the fading urge to constantly do in order to make it happen. When you're faking, action feels compulsive. You're always trying to force results. But when you're embodying, action becomes inspired, not desperate. You move naturally, without strain. It feels like flow instead of hustle. Checking for results is a big giveaway. Pretending makes you obsessed with the clock. Is it here yet? Why hasn't it shown up? But when you embody, the checking stops. You're no longer asking when, because you've already arrived internally. The outer world becomes a matter of timing, not a matter of doubt. You also notice a softening of negative self-talk. Pretending leaves the inner critic alive and loud, constantly whispering, "You're not there yet." But embodiment quiets that voice. It doesn't mean your mind never protests, but the protests lose weight. You feel less identified with old stories and more anchored in your new identity. Subtle confirmations begin to appear in daily life. Someone casually speaks words that echo your inner assumption. A small opportunity arises that matches your state. These are not proofs you hunt for. They arrive naturally as reflections of your shift, and instead of grabbing them desperately, you smile knowingly. Another sign is the disappearance of comparison. When you're pretending, you measure yourself against others to see if you're convincing. But when you embody, others stop feeling like competition. Their success feels like a mirror of your own. You're no longer chasing, you're resting. That rest is the mark of true embodiment. Your body also reveals the shift. Pretending feels tense. Shoulders tight, jaw clenched, breath shallow. Embodiment relaxes you. The breath deepens, the muscles release, the posture softens. It's as if your whole being says, "I'm safe here." That physical ease is the subconscious agreeing with your chosen reality. Time itself feels different. Pretending makes everyday drag. It feels like waiting in line. Embodiment makes time irrelevant. You're not waiting, you're living. Days flow because you're no longer counting them. The state itself is rewarding, and that joy in the present is the surest sign you're embodying the end. Another indicator is gratitude, not forced, but natural. When you're pretending, gratitude feels like a performance. I should be thankful so I attract more. But when you embody, gratitude bubbles up without effort. You feel thankful because you already are. Gratitude becomes proof of the shift, not a tactic. So how do you know you're not faking anymore? Peace replaces pressure. Flow replaces forcing. Knowing replaces hoping. And once these signs appear, you're ready to face the deeper challenge. How do you persist when the outer world still seems to deny what you've already embodied? This is where most people stumble. They embody for a moment, but when the outer world doesn't shift instantly, they drop back into doubt. Neville Goddard warned against this trap. The law of assumption is not magic in the sense of instant tricks. It's law, and law requires persistence. The question is, will you hold the end even when appearances say otherwise? Persisting means refusing to be hypnotized by what your senses report. The eyes may see lack, the ears may hear doubt, but you remain anchored in the inner world. Think of it like watching a movie you've already seen. You know the ending, so the suspense doesn't shake you. That's the stance of living in the end. Neville often compared it to faith. Faith is not begging, it's persistence in assumption. It's saying, "This is already mine," and returning to that truth no matter what arises. The outer world may present delays, but those delays are only shadows. The cause is already planted within. The effect must follow. A helpful analogy is planting a seed in the soil. You don't dig it up every day to check if it's growing. If you did, you'd kill the seed. Persistence is leaving it planted, watering it with attention, and trusting the unseen process beneath the soil. The outer evidence will show, but only if you let it. People often give up because they confuse time with truth. They think, if it hasn't happened yet, maybe it never will. But Neville taught that the only reality is the end you've assumed. Time is just the bridge between assumption and manifestation. Doubt collapses the bridge. Persistence keeps it intact. This is why persistence is not about force. It's about returning gently to the state, again and again. If you drift into worry, you don't panic. You simply shift back, like correcting your posture when you slouch. Small corrections build the habit of assumption, and habit is what makes the new state dominant. One of Neville's most powerful insights is that the outer world is always catching up to the inner. So when appearances deny your assumption, it's not evidence against you. It's proof you're in transition. The old state is still fading. The new one is taking root. That perspective changes everything. Persistence also means celebrating small confirmations without clinging to them. A conversation, a synchronicity, an unexpected opportunity, they're signs along the way, not the final proof. Embodiment doesn't chase signs. It rests in knowing. The end is already done, so any sign is simply an echo of what's unfolding. The true test of persistence is emotional stability. Do you collapse at the first sign of contradiction, or do you hold steady? When you live in the end, setbacks feel temporary. You know the scene is written. The outer can wobble, but the inner stays firm, and firmness is what bends reality. So persistence, when appearances deny it, is not about gritting your teeth. It's about softly, faithfully returning to the wish fulfilled. The end is more real than the process. And once that truth sinks in, a new realization dawns. Living the end is not faking, it's the truest way of living there is. Living in the end is not an escape from reality. It's stepping into the highest truth about yourself. Pretending says, I wish this were real. Embodiment says, this is who I am. That's why Neville Goddard teachings call it the most natural way to live. You're not lying to yourself, you're aligning with yourself. Truth doesn't always look logical. To the outside world, living as though your wish is fulfilled may seem unrealistic. But spiritual awakening begins the moment you realize the inner world is more real than appearances. Conscious creation is not fantasy. It's remembering that imagination creates reality, and reality has no choice but to follow. When you live in the end, you stop waiting for permission from circumstances. You no longer beg the world to change before you can feel safe, loved, or abundant. Instead, you dwell in the power of assumption, and from there the world rearranges itself. Outer proof becomes a mirror of inner truth. The beauty of this way of living is its simplicity. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need endless rituals. You don't need to perform. You simply embody the identity shift and let life echo back the state you already chose. It feels effortless because truth never strains. Consider how liberating it is. No more chasing, no more faking, no more proving. Living the end frees you from the exhausting game of appearances. It's not fake it till you make it versus dwelling. It's becoming the end, dwelling in it, and letting it feel natural. Not pretending, being, not forcing, resting. This is why Neville said the end is the truest place you can live. It's not fantasy, it's fulfillment, and fulfillment is your natural state. The world may not show it yet, but truth always wins. When you choose to embody the end, you're simply choosing to live ahead of time. The paradox is that living in the end feels more real than the so-called reality around you. That's because the world outside is always a step behind. By the time you see it, the inner cause was already planted. So what you call truth in the outer is really just a delayed reflection of the truth within. Living in the end also dissolves fear. When you embody already being loved, fear of rejection fades. When you embody abundance, fear of loss disappears. When you embody health, fear of illness loses grip. The end is not just a technique, it's a sanctuary. And from that sanctuary, creation flows. At its core, living in the end is not pretending, it's remembering. Remembering that you already are what you seek. Remembering that identity precedes manifestation. Remembering that the secret was never outside. It was always within, waiting to be assumed, waiting to be lived. That's the manifestation truth Neville devoted his life to teaching. So living the end is not performance, it's presence. Not acting, it's authenticity. Not a trick, it's truth. And when you grasp this, you no longer ask, how do I make it happen? You know you already did, which leaves us with the final step, tying everything together so you can step into this reality fully today. So let me ask you, are you still pretending, or are you finally ready to embody? Because the world will never give you what you're faking. It can only mirror who you've chosen to be inside. Neville Goddard's teachings make it clear. When you assume the wish fulfilled and live in the end, you stop chasing and start creating. Take a moment and reflect. What state have you been living in lately? Lack or fulfillment? Pretending or truth? That answer will reveal exactly why your reality looks the way it does. And the best news is, you can shift it today. If this message stirred something in you, don't just let it fade. Step deeper into this journey with me. Hit subscribe, turn on the notifications, and keep learning how to master conscious creation. Because your new reality isn't waiting. It's already here, waiting for you to live it.